This is a review of the best practices for completing the margin analysis and FX rates case. First thing you should always do is create a new worksheet, relabel it Executive Summary, and put this as the first tab. Exec Executive Summary should always be the first tab. And then I'm going to insert, from the insert, I'm going to insert a text box. And just put that there. And to, from, subject. Okay, so let's make this bigger. To the CFO from team, and put team name and team member names. The subject would be FX rates. Okay, so that to be filled in later when you put in, you're going to put in your, of course, your introduction, financial analysis, and a recommendation. And okay, so and what's great about this is you could always do your spell check. And I know I spelled recommendations wrong, so you should always run the spell check on your text box. This is nice to make sure everything's spelled correctly. Okay, so now that that's done, let's go back to the directions here. Using this bar down here, I can increase the size of what we're looking at, make it easier for you to view on the video. Okay, now we have last year's currencies, major currencies, cross rates. So the dollar is worth, of course, a dollar. $1, €1 is worth $1.20. £1 is worth $1.65, and $1 Australian is worth 91 cents US. And the next year, it looks like the euro is going to decrease in value, the pound is going to decrease in value, and the Australian dollar will decrease in value. So we have decreasing currencies, so each euro earned will not produce $1.20 like last year, it's only going to produce $1.05. So we have the major currencies decreasing in value. So that's probably what this case is about. So it's say using this year's exchange rates, complete each of the worksheets in the workbook. A new worksheet lists the total sales for each currency and calculate the world sales in dollars. Give me detail on gross margin for each currency and total company. How would the total sales and gross margins be affected if we use last year's exchange rates? Clean up the format in the spreadsheet, set print ranges, freeze tile rows, write an executive summary. Okay, so that's the basics of this case. So let's start with sales in dollars. And let me make this bigger so you can see easily. Okay, so the first thing I see here is formatting is terrible. So we have all these items these are all dollars, and they're not formatted as dollars. So I'm going to go the home page and I'm going to go to format and I'm going to change it to currency. So everything's nice in currency now. Um, so I also don't like this yellow color. This is very unprofessional, so I'm going to put no fill on that. Okay, so I just move this lower by double clicking to bring the formula down. And obviously, total cost is going to be standard cost times the units, which you can see from the formula here. Now, we have retail. Oh, one other problem is these title rows. You shouldn't have two title rows. That's very unprofessional. So I'm going to have to convert. Unfortunately, there's no way to quickly merge these. So what I'm going to do is I have to retype into one of the cells, the information. And the problem is if I didn't do this and I was going to sort, some of the rows have double the same title. So I can't sort when there's double rows. This is a very unprofessional um, way of setting up your titles. So I'm gonna, and there's no way around, like I said, of retyping them. It's just gonna take a little time. And put these in. Okay, so now I could delete this first row, and then with the second row, I'm going to wrap my titles. I'm gonna wrap the text, and then I'm gonna also center. I like everything centered. And then I'm gonna include. I'm just gonna fix up, make sure that they have borders. Okay, so everything's cleaned up here. Now that looks a lot better. So it says retail and wholesale. So this particular company has retail sales price and a wholesale sales price. So we have retail sales per unit and we have wholesale dollars. This looks like this is total dollars. So I'm going to write total wholesale dollars and I'm going to over here insert a column and I want to have wholesales per unit to create some wholesale per unit. And the way I could do this is just take the, before I do this, let me just resize these columns. Oops, do that. Okay, so wanted to resize these a little bit so we could see everything at once here. Okay, so I'm going to take the wholesale, total wholesale and divide it by the units to get the wholesale price per unit. Now I can see here that these are expressed as dollars. That's a mistake. So I'm going to put these back to number. Oops. Let's put these to number. Okay, because units are numbers and not dollars. All right, that was my mistake from before. Okay, so here's the wholesale. So now this makes sense. Let me double click. So if this turns to from a white plus to a black plus, I could double click the data down. I'll do that again. So when this goes from a white plus to a black plus, and I double click, I can bring that down quickly. So I have retail sales per unit, hotel sales per unit, standard cost, and this is obviously per unit. So let me relabel that. The better you could label your titles, easier for people to understand. Total cost. So that makes more sense. Total wholesale dollars, we should also have in here, let me insert, total retail dollars. So I'm gonna, okay, so total retail sales dollars. And we're going to take the retail per unit and we're going to multiply it by units. So now we have the total retail dollars. And then I double click that down. Okay, so now that makes more sense. Retail per unit, wholesale per unit, cost per unit, total cost, total retail, total wholesale. But see, also I like kind of like symmetry here. And since we have retail wholesale costs, we should have retail wholesale total cost here. So I'm going to insert here and put this column over here and delete this column. So now it makes more sense. I have my total here, retail, wholesale, cost, total retail, total wholesale, total costs. So the things are more logically laid out. I have my units and wholesale per unit was over here. I'm just going to delete that column. I didn't actually, because it was out of order, I didn't see that before, but we recreated it here. So, and they equal the same. So there's no real issue. I'm just going to delete that. Okay, so now total retail gross profit percent. So retail gross, and I'm just gonna relabel it profit so people understand that we're talking about profits here. Okay, now this formula is simple. It's gonna be, I'm gonna do this on do this on, I could do it per unit or on the total. So I'm going to actually do this on the total. So total retail sales minus wholesale divided by retail. And I'm going to have to actually put brackets around the first two to get a percent. Let's change that to percent. And for wholesale, we're going to take total wholesale minus costs divided by wholesale. And again, I must put in parentheses wholesale minus cost. Okay, and put the parentheses there. So here is our retail profits and our wholesale profits. Okay, and you could actually do a test. Is the per unit, let's move this over a bit. Is the per unit the same? So if I did wholesale minus retail divided by, sorry, retail minus wholesale divided by retail, I could see, is there a difference between the total and the individual? And no, it's the same. And sometimes that's smart to do a double check, but I wouldn't expect it to be different. Okay, so now I can do my totals on the spreadsheet. Things that are per unit don't need to be totaled, but totals need to be totaled. So I'm going to use my fast total and my quick keys to highlight the whole column. So now I have my total here. I don't need change on this because this is a big number. It's a waste of space to have change. And I can copy this to all of these. Now, when I calculate the profits, I'm going to bring these formulas up. I don't total them. There's no point in totaling percentages. So if I use these same formulas, I'm going to be calculating retail and wholesale based on the totals, and that's what I want. So I'm going to format these with the universal totaling information, the single line, double line. But actually, I didn't want to destroy the bold. All right. Now, what I'm going to do here is these generally wholesale and retail profit margins should have at least one position after the decimal point. Okay. So that's how I'd complete the first spreadsheet. And moving on, so here we're doing dollars, so we don't really need to, in the dollar area, do any currency conversion. So let's move over to pounds. So I'll do this one more time in pounds. Okay, make this bigger. Okay, so now I'm going to do this again, but now we have pounds. So again, I'm going to add some columns. So I did add, let's see, so we have retail here and a wholesale per unit. So let me just put this next, insert this. I want to put this over here. Delete. Okay. So now I can actually go over here and grab this information, copy this, put that here. Let's see. We're going to redo these titles. Total costs. Let's see. Oh, actually, this is just going to be costs. We don't need total. This is the total cost here. Costs. And then we have sales in pounds. And this looks like total wholesales in pounds. And then we have sales units, retail, over here, wholesale, or I'm going to put in profit. So we want to keep the same as the previous page. So let's delete this, and then we're going to cancel that. I want to wrap these texts, and then let's put some borders. First, we're going to do the square border and then the thick border. Okay. And I also like to always center these. Looks a lot better. And let me just, okay. So first thing here is we need the wholesale price per unit. So I'm going to take the wholesale pounds and divide it by the sales units. And I'm going to copy this format here. So this would be the wholesale. We have the retail, wholesale. I'm going to copy that down. And then we have the cost in dollars. So we want the cost in pounds. So we're going to have to do a conversion here. And we should also have the total retail sales. So I'm going to insert a column, and I can go back over here, total retail sales. Here. But this is going to be pounds. So let's put this back to pounds. Okay. Okay, so I added a new column here. And let's get rid of these funky colors. Okay. So now I got to fill in the rest of the columns. So we have retail sales per unit, wholesale sales per unit, cost per unit. And then we're going to have here again retail, wholesale, and total costs should be in the same logical flow. So let me delete this. So we should have retail, wholesale costs, total retail, total retail, total wholesale, total costs. So that should all be in alignment. So total retail sales, we're going to take retail times units. This is giving me my total retail sales, and I want to format this into pounds. Bring that down. Total cost. So first, here's where I first have to do the conversion. So what we want to do is cost in. We're going to take. I'm going to take the dollars, and I'm going to divide that by the exchange rate for this year for UK pound. So since the pound is more valuable, this into pounds. Since the pound is more valuable, $2 would only equal 1.28 pounds. So now we have the cost in pounds. And see what's strange here is that if I'm saying this is great, GBP is Great British Pounds, and over here we have it as 1 UK pounds. So there's some little discrepancies there as far as how things are. So I'm going to keep everything the same. I'm just going to say here pounds. I could either say pounds or Great British Pounds, but everything should be sort of in the same shorthand. So, okay, so you see here where when I click down, I get all these div/zeros. What that means is I didn't lock down the rates. So I'm going to have to go up here. I'm going to hit F4 on my key or put in individual dollar signs before the D and the 8. This will lock down that cell, so when I copy it down, I get all the same information. Okay, now moving over here, total costs, I'm going to put pounds times units. So I get my total cost, and then I'm going to copy that format over and copy this down. Okay. Now I'm going to work on the profit margins. So actually, let me just, I'm going to shrink a couple of these cells a little bit so I have more room to see what we're doing. Okay, so now we can see the wholesale. Okay, retail gross profit. So again, I'm gonna work off the totals. So we have total retail minus total wholesale divided by retail. And I always like to put the parentheses in at the end, not when I'm doing the sales. And wholesale. Wholesale minus costs divided by wholesale. Okay, make this a little smaller. All right, so now I could just copy these down. And I could also, let me undo this. If I wanted to, I could highlight both and copy them both down simultaneously. It's just saving an extra step. Now I want to do my totals. And of course, I'm going to start with pounds and go to my little sum key and then do my fast fill here. Now I have these hashtags, which means my cell isn't big enough. So I'm going to eliminate the change and then I'm going to copy this, move this over. Okay, so again with the cost, let's, is that, okay, so what I'm going to do here is, again, sum, but I want to always repoint it to highlight the range I want it to sum. Okay, and then copy this over here for units. Now again, gross profit and wholesale, I'm going to have to calculate. Sometimes you can take a shortcut, jump over here, copy this information, or I can easily just copy the row below and get the total. So now I'm going to highlight all of these and I'm going to put in the double bottom border to show that these are totals. Okay. And you see we have these in pounds. There's no sense to do the per unit. There's no sense to uh, find a total of anything per unit. You don't want totals on. You only want totals on what's totaled. So now this same procedure used for this, and you don't have to be 100% the way I do it. This is just an example of how I would organize things. So I would want things organized where I have the per units first, retail, wholesale costs, and then convert the cost per unit. Now I would relabel this actually standard cost in dollars per unit, just so we know this is dollars, and cost in pounds. And then why not just keep this standard cost in pounds? So it's the same. The title should always be logical. Then over here we have total retail sales pounds, total wholesale sales pounds, total costs, and then I should probably put pounds here too, so we know those are in pounds. So there's less confusion. Sales units, gross profit. Okay, so now this is pretty much how I would complete the sheet. And then you can follow that same procedure for Australian dollars and euros. So let's just move it. I'm not going to do that 2 and 3 times. You can do that later. So let's just go back to the memo here. Use a new worksheet to list the total sales for each currency and calculate the world sales per currency. Okay, so when it says new worksheet, I'll have to go here, create a new worksheet, and I'm going to put that right here. I'm going to move the instructions down to the end here because that's, just put total. So we'll call this totals. Okay. So here, let's see. Let me put the total costs. Okay, so here I'm going to create five columns. And let me put some borders around these. Okay, so total retail, total wholesale, total cost, retail, and wholesale. So I'm going to put in here dollars pounds, um, Australian dollars, euros, total. Uh, so in here, the total dollars, I would pull this over from total dollars. Enter. Now, if I pull this across, this is going to bring in, let me format these. Actually, I can go over here, grab the format. You see it's 2713.5, 2713.5. So I pull that over, and then pounds, I go over here to the pounds, get my total, direct that over, so, and then just pull this across, and then let me highlight the format and put that format here. Now, actually, when I was over here, I saw that this should not be highlighted, this should not be formatted in pounds. I'm going to change this to number, take out the currency. Okay, so these units should not be, these are not pounds. Okay, so now I'm going to take the total out of here for a second. So, and I don't want these double borders, so I'm just going to put a grid here, put a grid there. So actually, retail, I can go back to dollars, and I'm just going to pull retail, wholesale over, convert those to, and do the same for pounds, plus. And this way, I don't want to calculate. I could calculate, but I want to just always keep pulling in the data from the other worksheets. Now, and then we'd fill in what if you sales in Australian dollars and euros were complete. I'd fill them in as well. Now, this is just sales. So this is our sales information. So I'm just gonna format paint that here, and then we should probably put this, just highlight everything here in a thick bar. Okay. Now, you could also, since it's a chart, maybe you could also add a light coloring if you wanted to. Now, I would make a second table down here. So I'm just going to copy this. And this would be, I'd make this the converted. Let's say XX. Let's just make this cell a little bit bigger. Wrap that text. So this would be the FX conversion. And so what I would have to do here is I would have to take, and you see how this actually took different cells. So I'm going to have to point this up here. Oops. Bring this across. Okay. Okay, so I'll get that information out. Now, the pounds are actually going to be different. So I'm going to go pounds, and then going to divide by the exchange rate for this year, and pull that across. So that didn't, okay, so I have to, again, lock down the D and the 8 with dollar signs so I can pull this across. These values should be from up here. And they're not going to change because if you convert the currencies, you don't change the gross profit margin because it's just a percentage, a proportional percentage. Okay, so now these need to be formatted into dollars. So let me just highlight this, and I'm going to just do set everything here. Okay, so these pounds will convert to dollars. And actually, I see that the pounds here, there should actually be more dollars. So it's not, when I'm converting dollars to pounds, I need to divide. But if I'm converting pounds to dollars, I need to multiply. And I could realize that because pounds are more valuable than dollars, so I should see more dollars here. So I corrected that. And let me just make this a little bigger. So basically, and I always like to put these center. And I'm going to say here to make it clear, last year's rates. And then when I finish, I can actually put total dollars. Okay. And then this would be sum of that row. And then I would want to put the grid on here plus the double bottom. Okay. So this is where to have the dollars. So I'm converting, once I have it, the euro, the Australian dollars and euros, they'd be in here, they'd be converted to dollars, and I'd have the total dollars. And this is for last year's currency. Then I'd copy this whole grid, put this down here, and so I was actually working on, I'm sorry, my title is wrong. So these are conversions from this year. And then I want to do the same thing, but for last year. So let me delete all of these. So we have this year and last year. So I'm going to convert. But before I can do this, let me go back. I see that in here, these are the standard costs per dollar. So these actually would have to convert these to the new exchange rate, new last year exchange rate. But I'm not going to go that far. I don't think that's really that necessary. So what I'm going to do is, again, the dollars are the dollars, no conversion needed. But the pounds, I'm going to take the pounds and then again multiply, because I'm converting pounds to dollars, into last year's exchange rate. And we see that so far there is a difference here. Now, when I did the pounds here, this conversion, I used D8. I use this year's. Okay. So typically, the only thing that would change, so I can actually move these over to retail. But if I don't lock down the exchange rate, I won't be able to pull it across. Okay. And then again, now we could always, instead of just pulling this in, we could always calculate the percentages off the totals, and they should be the same. And actually, probably calculating them might be better. You see how they're the same. And I can bring these down, and then I can copy these across. Okay. And then I might want to maybe I just want to change this color so that we know Now we're dealing with a different, this is this year's conversion, FX this year conversion, and then this is last year conversion, so because we have an exchange rates this year and last year. So now we can sort of compare. We see that the numbers in dollars are different already. And when we bring in Australian dollars and euros, they'll be even more different. So for example, if I was to finish filling this out, I'm going to just make up some numbers here. So we could finish. Now I don't want to, these are just made up numbers just to show you how the grid would look finished. Okay, just put this down here. Okay, so then we could do a change row. So we could say last year minus this year to show the difference. So what we're showing here is, actually, let me start with this year minus last year. So this would be the change difference. And then I'm just going to copy the rates over. So we see the change actually, this doesn't really count. So we could see the change actually from, and maybe I'll just total that. Quick total. Let me copy that format. So this would be, now that doesn't necessarily make sense. We don't need to total that. I'm going to delete that cell. Okay, so this would be actually the change. So here's the difference between retail, wholesale, and costs. So we would say that if we're using this year's exchange rate over last year's exchange rate, the difference in the business with retail, the retail sales would have went up, the wholesale sales would have went up, and the total costs would have went up because of the change in the currencies. Now, once you have this data, you can start to make some charts and some graphs. But we could also double check, does this make sense? So this year versus last year. So if we look at the exchange rates, this year's currencies, the currencies have appreciated compared to last year. So last year currencies at 105, 150, 175. This year, the foreign currencies are stronger, which means they should produce more dollars. So every dollar, so every euro is going to be $1.20 versus $1.05. So that makes sense that in our totals that we're getting a change, a positive change in our retail sales, our wholesale sales, and our total costs. Now, for the profits, if we want to look at the profits actually, retail profits would be retail minus wholesale, and then wholesale profits would be wholesale minus. So these would just be total profits. We're not doing percentages here. And we could say total change. So we see that the retail profits are up 108 and the wholesale profits are up 88. Now, bear in mind that I just filled in these numbers here. These are not the actual numbers. I want you to do those currencies yourself and get those numbers directly. And then you could actually make a series of graphs or charts over this if you wanted to say, you could highlight any groups of information here and insert a table or actually insert a chart. Let's see. So we can insert a quick chart here, retail sales, um, show a relationship. And then, you can make more detailed charts if you wanted to. Let me delete this. Maybe you want to look at retail sales. Put this this year, so we know what we're looking at last year. So if I highlight and I press Shift and highlight, let's see. And you see that if I highlight them, there's also some charts come up. None of these are really good. I'd want to highlight, basically what I'd want to do here, highlight this section and then highlight this as a separate section to create charts based on this year's total retail versus last year's conversion rates, total retail would be a more telling chart to look at. And there's a way to highlight them separately, or you can also, if you wanted to make, say, a charts page, and this is here, charts, I can delete that. You could always go here and highlight this information, and you can paste special. And then for the paste special, I want to keep the values and number formats. I can actually just want to copy this, bring this over, paste special, values and number formats. I don't want to bring over the formulas. So now I can actually just make a chart based on these titles and inputs more easily. Recommended chart. So I can put in a recommended chart. And you'll see that they're actually, in this particular chart, we can actually see last year versus this year retail sales. And you'll see actually they're pretty similar. There's not much of a change. Just some ideas for some charting that you do off your total column. So let's go back to the executive summary. So what we're trying to do here, next they want to say, give me a detail of gross margin in each currency and total. And that's basically what we did in the totals here. We're doing the different gross margins that you could give a summary of. How would total sales and gross margins be affected by? So um, this you could look at. Uh, you go to totals here. What would be affected would be the gross margins per line wouldn't be affected, but the total in dollars would be different. You see here how they are slightly different. So that's the one thing that would be different there you should talk about. And clean up the formatting, set print ranges for each title rows, and write an executive summary. So yeah, so that's good sense to go up here and say data, let's see, view, and we want to freeze top row. So that way when we scroll, we always get the totals in there. And then we'd want to set, highlight the area and set print ranges and say in the page layout, we could highlight the area, uh, set the print area, and we can go to page setup and we could, adjust margins a little bit, insert a header and a footer, and then on the sheet, rows to repeat at the top. Okay, this should be the row we want to repeat at the top. Okay, and then we can say OK. And then we probably want to do a print preview. So I don't have a print preview up there. So we might want to look at a print preview and see what see what it would look like in the print preview and the number of sheets. So I see at the very end I have two columns hanging out here that isn't necessary. So I could go back in the page setup on the page. I'm going to decrease it a little bit so that way on the print preview, now I have only 15 pages. Everything's fitting on one page nicely. And so that's set up nice. And set parameters for title rows, formatting the spreadsheet. Yeah, and the formatting I did as I went. I cleaned up the columns. I redid the titles, made everything nice, and now it's time for the executive summary. So once you have your totals set up, and this is, again, I'm just showing you an example of one way to do it. You're free to be creative and do it different ways, and maybe you come up with a better formatting or layout, and that's fine. And then you should create, of course, take your data, create a series of charts, and then you're ready for your executive summary. You can do the introduction with Excel, functions and features you use, or just basic functionality. And you could just say, talk about, in the introduction, you could say, this case is basically analyzing the change of foreign currency rates to see the effect on world sales in dollars and profit margins. Then do your financial analysis where you talk about actually how did the change in exchange rates change the valuation of the company's total dollar sales when it's all converted back to dollars, and some reasons for why that's happening. And then finally, recommendation, what can the company do to protect themselves from change in exchange rates? One thing they can do is they hedge their position with foreign currency contracts or derivatives, and that might be the best recommendation to make. And okay, so I'm going to stop here. So that's my basic overview of how to work on and complete this case, and mostly from the Excel point of view, to give you an idea of how to organize and make things look clean and crisp. As far as color goes, you can always, it's not a bad thing to color the titles, but I would be, restrain your use of color a little bit. So actually, if I'm doing, I might want to keep, I can either kind of color code each of them in a different color. So when I'm flipping between the different pages, I can more easily kind of tell the color to the currency, and that make things a little bit more clearer. Okay, so I hope this was helpful for you and just giving you started and understanding how to complete this spreadsheet. And again, this is just one example of one way to do it. If you did something differently, that's fine. It doesn't have to be identical to what I did, but I just wanted to give you a start and ending of kind of how I would approach the spreadsheet. Thank you for your time, and I hope you found this helpful.